Welcome to our brand new podcast. Each Monday, we're going to be dropping a brand new episode. Aristotle famously had a quote and he said, "Happiness depends upon ourselves." Well, my goal with this podcast is to give you the tools to live a happy, a healthy, and a fulfilled life. This podcast, think of it as your portal into the minds and the methods of top authors, academics, and peak performers. Standing on their shoulders, it's my hope that you'll be able to see just a little bit further. I'm really proud to have John McAvoy as our first guest. John was born into one of the most notorious crime families in UK history. John's story, it unfolds from the confines of a maximum security prison in England, a convicted armed robber serving a life sentence. His life was mapped out and the outlook, it wasn't great. But then, a miracle. He found sport, multiple world records and national records rowing, all while still in prison. It paved the way for a second chance at life. Join us as we explore John's unyielding commitment to self-improvement, and his embrace of a second chance at life shows us how it's possible to turn failure into success. Not everybody is ready to hear this conversation, but if you are, get ready to go deep. It's John McAvoy. John, welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
How are you, my friend?
I'm really good, thank you. I'm really good. I'm gutted that our paths nearly crossed in Girona, and we was in the same. And I didn't really realise it was you.
I was driving to the airport and I got a message just like, "Were you in that coffee shop in Girona earlier on today?" And I was like, "Yeah, that was me."
We could have done it live.
I know. You know what? I've been trying to do more and more live. So I'm at this crossroads now where half the podcasts are live, half are in person. So we're definitely going to make it live in Alp d'Huez. That's where the goal is. Mate,
let's do it. We'll do it this year, this summer.
John, I think a lot of us have a few different chapters to our life. And, you know, we reinvent ourselves plenty of times through the course of our life. And maybe sometimes not always in a literal sense where I am one thing and I've become another. Sometimes maybe it's more, you know, it's a change in mindset. But you have this crazy literal story of reinvention when you've almost two lives. So I want to chat a little bit about, we'll call it life number one. What was your childhood like? How early were you exposed to crime?
So my really young childhood, like from 0 to 8, was amazing. Like, I have no negative memories of being a little boy whatsoever. I was loved. I had an amazing mum. I had an amazing sister. I had amazing aunties. They were from a big Irish family. My granddad, I can remember going around there for Christmases, and I just had this overwhelming loved childhood. I was probably overprotected by my mum. My mum was a very overprotected mother. And then when I started going to primary school, I always thought it was normal to have all these women in my life as a kid, and there was no father in my life. It was only when I started going to primary school that I realised I didn't have a dad. And I asked my mum where my dad was, and my mum explained to me that my dad had passed away before I was born. So my mum was 8 months pregnant with me. She'd been married to my dad for a year, and he died of a massive heart attack at 38 next to my mum in bed. So I was born a month later, and so I was born into this loving, caring, and again, that was why my mum was so overprotective of me, because of what happened to my dad. So I was a very inquisitive child, and I started asking my mum, well, where is my dad? And my mum explained to me my dad had died and he'd gone to heaven. But this did something to me when I was a little kid, where I realised that I wasn't going to live forever. And I always say that this sparked something off inside of me where I wanted my life to be of value. I wanted to achieve something. And it made me ferociously ambitious as a child. I knew I wasn't going to live forever. And I know I'm sort of simplifying it as a young boy back then. But I just knew my life wasn't going to be forever. I wasn't just going to live and live and live. And then I developed this sort of fascination with history. And then I used to read these books every month. They used to have this magazine in the UK called, they were called Discovery Booklets, and they were about a different part of history. And I remember putting all these puzzles together about Napoleon and World War I, World War II. And all these men and women had done all these things in history, and they were remembered. And this again just drove me to want my life to have a significance when I was older. And then what you can only then class as a perfect storm happened when I was 8 years old. My mum's ex-husband, that she married years before my dad and she got divorced from, I didn't know this at the time, but he got released from prison when I was 8 years old, and he come round to our home in South London. And it was the first time like a male had ever been in my home that I didn't know as an uncle, because my mum never had relationships. And I remember the first interaction I had with this man, and I was in awe of him. He was a very charismatic man, black hair, big gold watch, really shiny shoes. And he asked me to make him a cup of tea. And I went into the kitchen and made him this drink. And then I went into the living room and gave it to him, and he was talking to my mum. And then when he left, he gave me a £20 note, and it was the first time an adult had ever given me paper money. And he patted me on the head and he went, "You're a good boy." And he walked out. And I was just like, my eyes were just like saucepans. I was just staring at this paper money, and it was the first time an adult had ever given me paper money. And when he left, I asked my mum who he was, and my mum explained that my sister was actually his daughter. So at that point, I always thought my sister had the same dad as me. And obviously, because I was a young kid. And my mum explained that she was married to Billy before she married my dad. They got married when she was 16 years old, and then she had my sister when she was 18. And then Billy started coming into our lives, not to have a relationship with my mum, but to have a relationship with my sister. And at this point, I didn't know Billy had been in prison. I didn't know this at the time. But what happened was when he used to pick my sister up on the weekends, my mum would let me go with my sister and Billy because she didn't want me to like miss out on an opportunity to go to a nice place. Because at that point, my mum was a florist. She was like working minimum wage. And then Billy was coming in to take my sister out to nice restaurants, take us to nice places. And then what started happening as the months progressed, taking my sister out kind of stopped, and he carried on taking me out. And me and him developed this relationship. And I was, again, too young to understand where all of this wealth come from. But what I realized when I'd go out with Billy and he would take me out to restaurants and bars, everyone treated him differently to they treated other people in my life. And I couldn't really understand why, because I was too young. But even like the adults that he exposed me to, like these grown men that were in their 30s, 40s and 50s, like they were very different to the humans that I was like used to being around. And it was because, looking back retrospectively, they were all involved in organised crime. And when my granddad died when I was 12, we cleared my granddad's flat out. My granddad had a massive envelope in his bedroom drawer. And when I opened up this envelope, he had all these newspaper clippings that he kept of Billy. And Billy was one of the most prolific armed robbers in the United Kingdom. And when I met him, when I was 8 years old, he just finished serving a 16-year sentence for armed robbery. He had 5 acquittals at the Old Bailey. He was a multimillionaire when he was 21 years old. And when I was a kid, he always used to say to me, "Do you think you'll have more money when you're 21 than what I had when I was 21?" And again, being very ambitious, and I was very driven, and then I started attaching success to monetary gain. That was the goal. That was what I wanted. When I was an adult, I attached success to how much money I could make. And again, he kind of exposed me to this world where it became obtainable to me. I saw a path in which to get that money.
Do you think your mum should have sheltered you more from him?
Yeah, my mum. Yeah, my mum, obviously, she loves me to pieces. And when I was a little kid, she did everything to protect me. And she did to a degree when I was like 12, 13. She really tried to rein me back in. But I think that was the ship had set sail. Because I had been around him so much, and the people that I'd been around with him, it was all very exciting. When you're a young male and you're around like these alpha males and they're sort of praising you. And I used to do this like little party trick of being able to count money really fast. And everyone used to watch me and I used to count like £20 notes. And again, it's a very exciting life when you're a young kid and you're getting this validation from these men that I didn't ever have in my life when I was a really little kid. And as I got older and started becoming a teenager, I think my mum really started to understand my mindset was shifting massively. And she really did try to pull me back. But at that point, at 12, 13, 14, she kind of semi-lost control of me. And I started truanting from school. Like I look back now at the stress I put her under. And I really feel guilty for that because she is an amazing woman. And she got so upset when she saw me not going to school because I was again, started hanging out with these older men. I didn't have friends really my own age at 14. And sort of like my teachers become an extension of the state. So when I was around these older men and they're saying that like the system's the enemy, politicians are enemy, the banks are enemy, and that's sort of being projected onto me as a young kid, I go to school and then suddenly my teachers become an extension of the state, this corrupt system. And I started becoming disrespectful to my teachers because like getting an A in English and maths wasn't going to get me what I wanted in life.
Very goal driven, like from a young age.
Yeah, like as I said, like I can remember clearly when I was a little boy, my mum told me my dad had died and the impact that had on me. And then again, like with the people I was exposed to, they wasn't academically clever, but they were all incredibly driven men and they made lots of money out of organised crime. And being around those sorts of people as a young man, and again, like with my stepdad always saying to me when I was little, do you think you're going to have more money than what I had when I was 21 years old? And that was what my goal was. And I was ferociously driven as a kid. Like I really wanted to be successful at something. I wanted my life to have a meaning. I wanted to achieve something. And what I did foolishly as a young person, I attached success to the acquisition of wealth and having money. That is what I deemed as being a successful person in life, which obviously as I've grown as a man and developed, I now realised that isn't the thing that makes you feel happy and content in life.
And where's that progression from, boys will be boys, a bit of truancy? Like I think most people listening can identify with having knocked off school to go and play a five-a-side with the lads or, maybe shoplifting on lunch break in school. When does that tip from boys will be boys into crime?
I think, again, like my younger life is very unique in regards of the exposure to the people I was exposed to as a kid. So like my dad that actually died was a legitimate businessman. So he owned 3 nightclubs. He owned a building company. He was a workaholic, and that's basically what killed him at 38 years old. He had a massive heart attack. He wasn't the healthiest person, but my mum said he hardly slept. He was always working. And his brother, Michael, committed the biggest armed robbery in the world, and he stole £26 million worth of gold bullion from Heathrow Airport. And what was really like a big moment in my younger life when I was 12, even though I had the exposure through Billy to what Billy was exposing me to these grown men and taking me out into these environments where all these organised criminals were, there was a film that was made about my uncle called Fool's Gold. And Sean Bean played my uncle in this film. And I remember sitting in my home as a young man or young boy, watching this film about someone that had the same surname as me being played by a Hollywood actor, sitting on £26 million worth of gold bullion. And then that had a huge impact on me. Not the fact that my uncle was sitting in prison for 25 years for that offence, but the glorification of the actual offence and the money. And I often say this, but I feel embarrassed now, but that watching that film inspired me to want to commit the biggest robbery in the world when I was a kid. That was...
I remember being in law school, and as part of law school, on one of the final weeks, you went to visit the prison. And law school, as you can imagine, it's drawn from a very upper class environment. I had friends then from all walks of life, so it's slightly different. I knew some of the lads who were in prison that we were going to visit, and all these lads in law school were just baffled. And I remember talking to one lad on the way out, and it showed me just the flaw in the thinking of people from some stratospheres of society, where he said, well, the difference is I made good choices and he made bad choices. That's why I'm in law school and that's why he's in prison. But your story just goes to highlight, like, it's such an immersive experience, your early childhood. It's almost like if we wanted to make the perfect runner and you and me sat down, we'd be like, okay, what are we going to do? Well, his dad's a famous runner. His uncle's a famous runner. We're going to put him in Kenya surrounded by the runners. It's the classic nature versus nurture. You're in an environment where it's very hard not to excel in crime.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. And I've had this conversation many times over the years with friends of mine. Like when I got released from prison, I joined a high performance rowing club in Southwest London called London Rowing Club. And it was a feeder system into the GB rowing squad. So I'm there. And obviously my social circle completely changed overnight when I joined this rowing club. And I remember, like, when my story started coming out, I would sort of talk to people at the club and There were a lot of people there that worked in the finance industry. There was a lot of people there that worked as judges and barristers and lawyers and stuff. And I remember one day there was one guy in particular, Robbie. He won a silver medal at London 2012 in the men's lightweight 4, worked at Goldman Sachs. And we were talking about things that I said to him, because again, what we've just said here, I said I was having these same conversations walking around in a maximum security unit in Belmarsh prison with people that were drug trafficking. But again, it was the environment. And Robbie was exposed to this as a kid, and these people were exposed to this. The IQ, the intellect, like, is there. Like, these people aren't lazy people. They're very driven, focused, goal-oriented people. But again, like you've just said, it comes back to how environment can shape you so dramatically.
It's high performance. Like, it's high performance. You know, we obviously have to parse away and park the fact that it's illegal for this, you know, theoretical conversation, but it is high performance. I had a friend of mine who I train with occasionally, Ger Redmond, on the podcast. He's an Irish pro triathlete. And Ger had an interesting story, not too dissimilar to yourself. He signed as a pro soccer player out in Dunfermline, and, you know, from a really working class estate here in Dublin. Then he got a phone call when he was at Dunfermline and said, yeah, your dad's been arrested and sent to prison. You need to come home. And he came home to shocking situation. The family house is getting reprisal attacks, and, you know, his mom's not in a good state. So he has to step up and be the man of the house and get involved in organised crime. And he eventually, you know, climbed all the way up the ladder in organised crime, had to go to prison, had a moment where, you know, a eureka moment where he's like, my dad's in prison, my granddad's in prison, and I'm in prison. If I don't break this cycle, my son's going to be in prison, I'm going to be in prison, my dad's going to be in prison. He ultimately broke out of it and became a pro triathlete. But chatting to him about the kind of parallels between high performance entrepreneurs and high performance criminals, like if you think of even a bank job, you've all the logistical organizational stuff you'd have with running like a startup, except you need to motivate people who, some of them could potentially stab you in the back. You don't have the same legal safeguards you would in a business. What's that like, to try and be around and choose these high performers to build a team for these complex jobs?
Yeah. Again, I would say that I kind of walked into it. Like, I remember when I was in prison, when I went to prison the second time, and I was like 24 years old. I can remember reading in the Telegraph, there was a piece written about organised crime in the UK and how it had evolved from the 1960s, the 70s, and in the 80s it evolved into high-end armed robbery. And when I was reading this piece, they named 5 men in the UK that were instrumental in like the way organised crime changed in the UK. And of those 5 men, 4 of them were in my childhood as like role models.
Crazy.
So like that was the exposure of the people that I was around as a kid. And then obviously when I went to prison, you just get exposed to more of those people at the very higher end of organised crime.
So is it like a brainstorming session at points in prison for the next crime?
Yeah, like when you're in there, it kind of, because when I went to prison the first time when I was 18 years old, I got arrested for conspiracy to commit robbery, and my stepdad had been arrested at this point. But in the UK, when you're under 21, you can't be kept with adults. You have to be kept with young offenders. But because the police believed I was a high escape risk, so like when my uncle was in prison, he tried to break out in a helicopter. So there was all this information around me and my stepdad and stuff. So they did something that was very unusual within the British criminal justice system, where they did something called starred me up. So I couldn't be kept with young offenders. They had to star me up to then put me in an adult prison and made me a category A prisoner. So when I was 18, I was held in a maximum security adult prison in Wood Hill. And I remember like walking on the wing, and you had all these older men that were in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s and up. And even the prison officers were like kind of, it was weird, like lavishing respect on you because they saw you as being a proper criminal. But again, being a young man, I was obviously very impressionable. It sort of feeds into your ego. And like, even when I went to prison, like, again, people often say, what does it feel like? But I had no fear of the system. It didn't scare me because of all the stories I used to hear about being in prison. And my stepdad used to tell me these things all the time about like not showing weakness. And that was really ingrained into me as a kid. It was about like being a strong man and don't ever let the system break you. And then this is where, for me, when I went to prison the first time and the second time at the beginning, I had this mindset where I would not be broken by them. And for me, change and this was very important, this was what would have been a very difficult thing for me to overcome. Change to me meant they had broken me. And that was what my stepdad used to say, like when he saw men that was in prison and they come out and decided to do something else with their lives, they were weak people. And in the world that I was in, that would always be seen as that. Like if you went to prison and you come out and wanted to do something else with your life and not be involved in organised crime anymore, the system had basically broken you and they had changed you and you was a weak person. And I had that in my mindset as an 18 when I went into that maximum security prison. And then when I went back when I was 22, and I was a double category A in that maximum security unit in Belmarsh.
And when you say they break you, are you talking structurally, like as an institution, just curtailing your freedom that breaks you, or specifically talking about the prison guards and strategies they use?
Again, like when I look back on my life, like you create this imaginary enemy, right? Like for me, it was the system. And I remember when I got to that process of wanting something else for my life, and I looked at what I thought I was at war against, and I had that moment of reflection. I realized how pathetic it all was. It was like I put myself in that position. Right, it was me that broke the law, that put myself in prison. And what I noticed over the years when I decided to turn my life around and do something else with it, like you have to accept responsibility for your actions. No one's put you in that position. Like I had to say, I've put myself in this world in here. It's me that's done this. I have to accept responsibility, and I have to accept responsibility for my life to get myself out of it and to do something more positive with my life. But when I was a young man, like I had so much hatred in my body towards a system that I thought was corrupt and not fair. And my stepdad used to say to me all the time about never being a victim of the system, never letting the system beat you down. And the working class man just gets beaten down every day. And I don't want to swear, but he used to say to me, the system fucks everyone and we fuck the system. And that was really powerful as a little kid, like hearing that stuff. And then when I went to prison, suddenly like my officer, the officer that was locking me in that cell, was an extension of the state. Like it was a real person that was putting me into that cell. But I put myself in that cell. That prison officer didn't put me into that cell. It was my decisions that led me to being in there.
What's the moment you change? Alcoholics talk about having to hit a bottom of the barrel. And I want to dig into this because I think this is important. At the start, I started the podcast by saying some people want to make a change, maybe not always in a literal sense, like you, from illegal behavior to walking the line and being legal. Maybe someone just wants to change from, hey, you know what, I'm an investment banker and I want to be a carpenter. Like, what's that switch that clicks for you where you're like, I can't continue on this path? Talk me through that mindset.
Yeah. I've got to be honest with you, like when I went back to prison the second time, I was double category A. I was bouncing around these maximum security prisons across the UK. I did not want to change. I didn't want to be rehabilitated. I was playing the system. I wanted to work through the category systems. And then the first opportunity I would have had to get out of that place and go abroad and still be a criminal, I would have taken. And that was what my thought process was. It was like, I'm not going to be on this life license for the rest of my life in the UK and never be able to travel, and I'm still going to commit crime. And I knew if I stayed in the UK, I'd probably end up going back to prison because they could recall me at any time. And then what happened for me was everything was going to the way I wanted it to go. I was progressing through that category system. I was a category B prisoner. I had access to mobile phones that you're not allowed to have in prison. I was talking to criminals outside, and I wanted to put things in place. So when I had that opportunity to get out, everything was ready for me to go. And my life changed in 2009 on the 14th of November when my best mate died. And it massively impacted me. Like it was the first time I'd ever, as an adult, loved anyone that I deeply cared about. And I remember when I found out he died, I can't even remember before that the last time I cried. And I remember being in that prison cell in disbelief that my best friend, the person that I deeply loved and cared for, had died. And it was the manner in which he died, like he was committing a robbery in the Netherlands. And as they were getting away, the car flipped and my friend died. 2 other people in the car died. And the driver was paralysed from the waist down. And because they were from the UK, committing this offence in the Netherlands, it made news at 10. And I remember the following evening, news at 10, it was a segment. And I just remember watching the last moments of my friend's life on this news segment on a CCTV camera. And I saw the car flipped over on the side of the motorway in the Netherlands. And I looked at my life, and going back to what we spoke about at the beginning, like I'm sitting in prison with this £16,000 Rolex Daytona on my wrist. And mate, I looked how pathetic it was, and I was really upset. And I remember being super emotional. And I just realized how pathetic my life was. Like, again, this war that I'd created in my head of me against the system. And the system had me where they wanted me. Like, I was sitting in a cell rotting. I was 26 years old. I was an ambitious young boy. I wanted to achieve something in my life as a kid. And I'm sitting here, and it made me reflective of my own mortality again. And I realized that, like, I'm not going to live forever. And it really did sharpen that up. And it was just a perfect storm of events of the way in which not just my friend died, the impact it had on me, but how visually it was for me to watch it on the news, and for me to just reflect on where I was, and just for someone that I deeply loved and cared for to die, and I'm never going to see them again. And he died in the pursuit of greed. And I made a decision that night that I would never again in my life commit a crime ever again. But I was completely and utterly lost. Like, genuinely, like, I was going to have to let go of my identity. Like, my identity was crime. That was all I knew. Like, most of my friends were criminals. Like, and I knew by me wanting to go down a new path, how I would be perceived in that world. But I didn't give a shit. Like, I was like, I don't want this life anymore. I don't want to be around these people. But the issue is that I was locked in prison. I was serving a life sentence with a tariff that I had to serve before I could be considered to be released. I'm around criminals that I don't want to be around. I don't want to be engaging with them talking about crime, but I'm trapped. So it was like, how am I going to remove myself from this place? And again, it's something I often say. It's like being a drug addict locked in a crack den trying to get off drugs. So I had to find something, and I didn't know what that thing was because I gave up my education when I was at school. But it was like, what is it? Well, how can I take myself out of this place? And I was so lucky. I got on an indoor rowing machine, and there was an incredible human being and a prison officer that saw how good I was on an indoor rowing machine.
But that's the first time you've changed the lens in this conversation that you've used success through. Up to this point, we're half an hour odd into this conversation. The two ways you view success, it's status, the way you looked up to your uncle, how everyone treated your stepdad, they treated him differently, and it's money. They're your two lenses for viewing success up to this point. And now you're opening your mind a little bit and saying, actually, there's many different ways to view success. There's now self-progression and self-development. Health is another currency. You know, we've all these different currencies. Maybe spirituality is a currency, religion's a currency, relationships is a currency, free time is a currency. But up to this point, you only have two currencies: status, money. I know how serious you take your goal setting, whether they're fitness or life-related goals. If you're looking for a powerful ally to support you on this journey, look no further than Huel. Huel has become my secret weapon for when I don't have time to prepare a balanced meal. It ensures I get the nutrition I need without sacrificing time or taste. Plus, it stops me from reaching for that takeaway menu. I always throw a bottle into my backpack when I'm heading into the city to work, and it stops me eating junk convenience foods, snacking on croissants and bars of chocolate, because I know they don't support my training goals. It's a handy, nutritious meal on the go, and it's got over 22 grams of protein. Huel is perfect for athletes that don't have time to cook or prepare food before a training session. It's convenient, nutritious fuel at your fingertips, ensuring you hit your daily fueling needs for that session. Huel Ready to Drink has 26 essential vitamins and minerals in every single bottle. You're getting a whopping 175 health benefits. Plus, it's made from natural ingredients like tapioca, sunflower seed, coconut, and more. The best part, it's the flavors. There's 8 crazy, beautiful flavors. Iced coffee is what's in my backpack right at the moment. You can get Huel directly to your home. All you got to do is head on over to the Huel website, huel.com/roadman.
Yeah, like, sport changed literally my whole life upside down in a positive way. Not just because I realized I had this ability in my body, because that prison officer saw how quick I could row on that indoor rowing machine in the prison gym, but because I developed a friendship with that man, and sport brought us together. And I can remember, like, going down the prison gym, and I used to sit in the prison night sports hall with him, and he would bring me in books about climbing Mount Everest and ultra running and cycling, and he completely changed my whole outlook on life. And he brought sport into my life, and he supported and aided me on this incredible journey I went on whilst I was in prison, because he identified that I had this gift in my body that I never knew I had. And I was really good at endurance sport. And it was the first time that I ever realized this, when he identified that talent in me.
But there's such a similarity, isn't there? Because you're taking those high performance traits and you have a mentor, Billy, and he leads you into a life of crime. Now you take the same high performance traits, drive, ambition, hard work, and you have a new mentor and it channels you in a totally different direction.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And what was really important for me was Darren used to bring me in autobiographies of like Olympic athletes. And this is like where my journey for cycling started to develop, in this passion I had for the sport. And he would bring me in all these autobiographies, and Lance Armstrong was one of them. And I remember the first book I ever read about like an elite athlete was Lance Armstrong. It's Not About the Bike. And I remember reading that book, and then there was another book with James Cracknell, the Olympic rower, and all of these characteristics, like the will to win, the wanting to be the best, the drive, this passion for something. Like the only people I'd ever really been exposed to as a kid that had that mindset was organised criminals. And then suddenly this whole new world opened up to me that I didn't even know existed. Like I never had any interest in sport as a kid whatsoever. I never really engaged with it. But then suddenly I found this way, this outlet where I can fundamentally be the person I am, but shift my energy into something positive. And then the thing that was destroying my life, like when I was channeling that mindset into something negative and it was leading me basically to wasting my whole life in prison, when I reshifted that mindset into something positive, which was sport, it completely become a massive attribute for me to create the life that I wanted, which was to lead a positive life. And like I said, like spending all that time with that prison officer in the gym, Darren, he taught me so many life lessons about helping people, giving back, contributing. He was a very humble man, very giving man, very empathetic. And he was the first male I ever had in my life like that. I never had those sorts of men in my life as a kid. And then suddenly this prison officer's come into my life. And it was such a powerful coming together. And he is the man that is responsible for the person that I am today. He's the one that shaped me to be the person that I am today.
I kind of surveyed our email list. I told them I was chatting to you and I asked for one question. And the one that came back was, did you have to make a huge shift in mindset from crime to sport? But listening to you there, it's actually not a huge mind shift at all. It's a lot of the same skills.
Yeah, 100%. And what I was very lucky with, I had an ability. And then when because when I look back on my life retrospectively, like a lot of the characteristics of the way that I become, like when I was in prison for a year in segregation. So basically isolated from the prison population for 365 days. And I used to do these cell circuits. And that was the thing that made me feel alive when I was in isolation. And I drew on that a lot, and I still do now. Like when I'm in deep suffering, like when I'm doing a physical endurance event and I'm in tremendous amount of pain and discomfort, nothing is worse than that. And that situation I went through in prison, and I draw on that experience and I use it as positivity to drive me forward, to drive me up a mountain. And then when I started doing the sort of endurance events in prison on the indoor rowing machine, and I broke records, I can remember on a few occasions, like I was in so much pain. Like I did a 100K world record on the indoor rowing machine, and I'd never in my life experienced pain. Honestly, the pain and discomfort I was in was just on a level I'd never experienced, because I never really did endurance sport. Well, I didn't do endurance sport as a kid, but I started getting into it at 26 years old in the prison gym. So a lot of the experiences I was feeling doing these longer endurance events, it was a first for me. But I just remember like just gritting it out and being super focused and sort of absorbing the pain into my body and thinking, like, I want to use everything I've gone through as a positivity and positive energy to drive me forward, to be successful, to beat this record.
What was the pole sport? What like magnetized you towards it? Like why not art?
It made
why
me
not
feel alive.
literary?
What, in regards to sport?
Yeah. Why sport? Like I know because I'm obviously addicted to sport as well, but I struggle with what magnetizes people to sport initially.
I love the I love the process of getting better and seeing that goal, like that process happening. I love the feeling how it makes me feel in regards of flow state. Like when you're fit, and this is like when I first started rowing in prison, I wasn't rowing to break records. I was rowing because it was like I created this little portal and it took me out of prison and it transcended me out of that wall and over that wall and everyone left me alone in prison. And I was fortunate that doing those repetitions, thousands and thousands and thousands of meters on that indoor row machine, I had this ability in my body. And as I got physically stronger and fitter, it allowed me to really like reach this level of feeling that I'd never felt before, of like flow state, being at one with my body. I'd never felt like that before in my life. And I think and again, it's not like this when you do pre-season, you start to train towards that goal at the beginning of the year and you feel tired and stuff. But once you start getting to that feeling and the body feels strong and you become so entwined with how you feel internally and psychologically, and you go into this flow state and it's just effortless. And that was so addictive to me. Like when I was in prison and even now, like, man, I absolutely love going out, like on my home, on my bike, riding for hours or going running on my own and just being in my own thoughts. And the way that sport makes me feel is just physically, it makes me feel amazing. But then also the people it's brought into my life. Like sport is such an amazing vehicle for bringing in positivity into your life and meeting incredible people. And it really has like, it's opened up the world to me. Without sport, again, I wouldn't be the man that I am today.
We're painting this as a really simple transition that you were a criminal, you found rowing, but I'm sure the reality is in that world, there's a lot of dangerous people. And you can't just rock in one day and say, hey lads, I'm giving my 2 weeks notice. I'm no longer a criminal. I'm now going to be a taxpayer. I'm now going to become a citizen. How do you logistically go about removing yourself from that world in a way where your prior associates don't see it as a threat anymore?
So in regards to the whole prison situation, what ended up happening, which I didn't realize was going to happen, when I discovered I was good at this thing, which was rowing, and I attempted to break these records and I broke a lot of them, it created this whole vibe around the prison where like I become like a champion of the prisoners. It was me against like the people outside. And I remember like one of the records, I come on the wing and literally it was something out of a film, like there were inmates on the landings clapping when I come on because like I was taking part, I was competing, like trying to break these records that people outside of prison had set and I was beating them. So that was that part of it. So I never had any issues in prison, even though sort of I started to sort of sit there as a prison officer in the prison gym, which believe me, in that world is a no-no. Like you don't have prisoners sitting in prison in the sports hall with a prison officer. But it changed like the dynamics of the way, I don't know, like the way prisoners perceived what Darren was doing for me. And he was a good guy. And they were going, actually, this prison officer's actually helping this guy. Like he's actually like, look what he's doing with his life. And that was really lovely to see. Like it really, really was. And Darren was a very well-respected prison officer in that prison. Like prisoners liked him a lot, which that isn't always the case in prison. And then in the regards of how I wanted my life to be when I got out of prison, I basically started disconnecting from everyone whilst I was in prison. So when my friend died in 2009, I stopped really communicating with anyone outside of prison other than my mum. And no one even knew I got released when I got released in 2012. It was only when sort of my public profile started to grow as an athlete. And at the beginning, like I didn't want anyone to know about my past because I felt quite ashamed of what I'd done. I joined a rowing club. It was a high performance rowing club. Like I got released from prison on a Friday. On a Saturday morning, I joined this rowing team. And then like on a Wednesday night, I'm sitting on an indoor rowing machine and I had Sophie Hoskins that won a gold medal at London 2012. And I got Rob Williams that won a silver medal on 2 rowing machines next to me. And that become my life. And I become like John, this guy that joined this rowing club. I didn't tell anyone about my past, but my past started to come out and sort of, I wrote a blog and the blog went viral within rowing and there was a lot of support. But as I sort of got better as an athlete and my story started getting out, I would honestly say that I've never experienced anything negative because I think people, even from my old life, kind of acknowledge what I've gone on to do. And it's probably because I've excelled at sport, I think. But yeah, like even for me, like there's been occasions where back in 2000, and I think it was 18, I was at 10 Downing Street having a meeting around opening up schools for disadvantaged children during a 6 weeks holiday. And then after the event, I went back a week later and Theresa May was giving a speech. And she mentioned me and about the work I was doing. And even for me, it was like a pinch yourself moment. Like years before, I hated these people. And then years later, I was in the sanctum with the people that I hated as a kid.
Did you get acceptance in that environment? I know I've friends who, made some mistakes and spent some time in prison and then tried to step back into the athletic world. And they weren't always greeted with open arms from everybody. There was, a cohort of people who'd say, leopard doesn't change his spots and expressions like this.
Yeah, like I said, like when I first joined the rowing club, for the first 4 months, no one knew anything about me in regards to my past. I didn't even tell anyone I set any records because I knew the first thing that would come up on Google was like the Sun newspaper, the Daily Mail, the Times. So I didn't tell anyone about records or anything because I knew they would end up discovering it. But when people did start to find out, what happened there was I was there for like that period of time and people knew me as me. They knew me as the person I was that day. And it broke down preconceptions because there was a lot of people that was at that rowing club that were police officers, that were judges, that would have probably thought of me very differently if I would have joined that club and been known as this ex-con that's just got out of prison that's joined the rowing club. And I had a lot of people come up to me, like people that were police officers, saying that like they were blown away. And I remember one in particular, I was running with him and I said, look, like he opened up about something personal. And I said, I want to tell you something. I was in prison. And when we were running along, he went, oh my God. He went, I can't believe I never made the link between your surnames. He was, but you wouldn't, would you? Like I was at this rowing club, like he's out of work. But then I told him, and me and him become really good friends. Like I used to go around his house for dinner, and again, it showed me how much I had changed as a person. Because years before, like he was my enemy. I hated people like him, and now I was accepted. And again, I think people saw me as a guy that was working hard towards a goal. The way I was respectful towards people, and I was always at the club on time. I was always respectful of people's time, and people reached out and they really did go above and beyond to help me as an athlete and as a person. And I've always said this, like I stumbled by chance into a club and an environment of sport. Like when I joined that rowing club, my goal was like, I want to be the best athlete I can be. I want to smash people on that rowing machine. I want to get in a boat. I want to learn to row. I want to go to world championships. Like that's what my ultimate goal is. But what I didn't realize, I went into a sporting community and these people become dear friends of mine and they're friends of mine today. Like they really did help me in life. And when my past did come out, like it was overwhelming, the support. And I can remember I had guys that like won world championships at rowing, like that would go out and teach me how to single scull on the Thames because they wanted me to succeed, because they saw that like I did wrong in my life and nothing I did was ever a mistake. It was a deliberate decision, but they were poor decisions on what I thought was right and wrong at that time in my life. But they saw that I made those poor decisions and then wanted to correct them and do something positive with the rest of my life. And they wanted to be part of that journey and help and support me. And they did.
Do you think your mom and maybe to a lesser extent your stepdad, you think they instilled values into you? Obviously, there were values that at one point got you into trouble, but do you think those values also saved you?
I heard a quote once about you can't blame someone for all the bad if you're not going to blame them for the good. Like there's a lot of things that my stepdad taught me as a young kid that definitely sort of has had a lasting impact on me in regards of like, I was very shy as a child. Like I would hide behind my mum and I wasn't very confident. And he would put me in situations where like I would have to order food. And he even though he exposed me to a lot of criminals, he exposed me to a lot of people that were legitimate as well, like accountants and lawyers. And he'd want me to interact with different groups of people. And he'd say it was very important that you're able to converse with all groups of different people. You don't just hang out with criminals all the time. And my mum, like going back to my childhood, like my mum is just such a lovely woman. She's so loving and caring. And I know a lot of people will say this about their mum, but my mum would genuinely give half the money in her purse to a homeless person on the street. Like, she's such a giving woman, and she's such an amazing woman. And I'm very lucky, and my sister's very lucky to have a mum that cares about us and loves us so much, especially with the work I do today with young people. And I see not everyone gets that sort of love as a child in their homes.
Did you have a hesitancy? There's a word that's used, I think the origins of it are like Sicilian mafia, and it got transposed into cycling culture, omerta, where we don't talk about shit. You're a very public persona now. How does that sit with this idea of breaking the omerta? Does that kind of nag you, or are you parked it?
No. Like, again, it's because I don't care. Like, and I have to go back. Like, I had to let go of my ego, because if it would bother me, it would have massively bothered me. Like, years ago, my stepdad used to say to me, in life, all you've got is your name. And if people think you're a piece of shit, you're a piece of shit. And once they think that in that world, you're an informant or whatever, you're tarnished forever. That's all you've got is your name and reputation. And I again, that's the ego, right? So when I'm in that world, it is about being strong, being defiant, not letting the system break you. And then suddenly, like, I come out of prison, and then I become friends with lawyers, with police officers, with judges. I'm at Parliament. I'm doing all these events with politicians. So years ago, I know me as the person I was 15, 16 years ago, I would have looked at me and gone, he's a piece of shit. But I genuinely don't care what those people think of me. I genuinely don't. But like I said, I've been fortunate in regards. I've never experienced negativity to me directly, but there will be people that look at me and go, yeah, like, I've broke that code. I've pulled away from that life. Who do I think I am? I'm interacting with the state and stuff. But genuinely, I don't care, because I wanted my life to move forward in a positive direction. And I knew I had to let go of my ego. And I think a lot of people that are in that world get to a point where they go, I've had enough of this. But they find it very difficult to be, what I would say for them is to be a normal person, like to not have that same element of respect. And most of the time, it's not even respect, right? It's fear. Like, people aren't respecting you. They're just scared of you. And that's a very big difference.
What do you think about yourself as a role model? Obviously, your story is a story of personal redemption, but even if you don't like it, your story is also, it's about influencing others. Is that something that sits easy with you? Are you happy to be a role model?
I don't see myself as a role model, but I've seen the impact I can have on other people's lives. So, like, the journey that I've been on, it does resonate with a lot of people, because I think it shows a story of someone that was going down a very bad road, and did go down a very bad road, and then got to a point and went, I don't want this anymore, and decided to do something different with their lives. And I know a lot of people over the years have reached out to me, and it's had a big impact on their lives, like when they've listened to my story. And now I'm very fortunate in the position that I'm in regards of where sports brought me and the opportunities sports afforded me, and how it's aided me have the life I've got today. And that's why I always feel this moral duty to open up the power of sport to as many people as possible, especially young people and kids. And that's something that's super important to me, because I just want people, it's not about people not going to prison, it's about people realising that they're limitless to what they can achieve. And it doesn't matter how far down the wrong road you've gone, you can always pull it back, and you can always do something with your life to make you feel content and at peace and happy. And I'm at that place now in my life, and it's took me a long time to get here, but I feel like I'm there now. And if I can demonstrate to people that it is possible, then yeah, like I'm very proud of the fact that I'm able to do that.
Sport's powerful, isn't it? Like, even if you think about going for a bike ride or going for a run, like, you do that with enough consistency, it'll take someone from fat physique to athletic physique. And then even on a zoomed in level, it's often taken me from, I'm having the worst day of my life, jump on the bike for an hour, all of a sudden I'm having a great day. Like, it's such a powerful transformer of mood.
Mate, I often say this. I wish I could can up how it makes me feel and give it away to the world for free, because like you've just said, if we could do that, I think it would bring people so much joy and happiness into their lives, because the way it makes us feel, right, it's such a beautiful thing. And I just wish that more people did it, because I think it would make the world such a better place, because it speaks a language, it's universal. Like every human on the planet would get the same feeling from it. It unites people together. I wish I was able to do that. And that's why I'm such an advocate, and I preach from the rooftops about how amazing sport is and how amazing it is when you're physically active and you look after your body, because it makes you feel so much better in life. And again, even for your mental health, it elevates it so much.
What would you say to somebody who's in an environment now where they're stuck in a cycle of negative choices and they think there's no way out?
It's small steps, right? Like when I was locked in that segregation unit, I had nothing. Like I was in there for 365 days in a 12 by 7 foot coffin. But when I was in there, I had control of myself, and everything was making these small little incremental steps forward. Every day I got a little bit better. I read books. There was no big jump. There was no big leap from where I was to where I am. This has taken like years and years of being persistent. The jump isn't one big jump. You have to take those small steps. And again, the key is patience. And if you can just erode doing one bad thing each day, and you keep doing that, eventually all the bad things will go, whatever that is in your life, the thing that's been detrimental to you.
Consistency is the cheat code, isn't it? Patience, consistency. They're not glamorous words.
No, they're not. And it does take a lot of time, and it takes a lot of self-belief, and it takes a lot of hard work. And eventually, because again, like I'm no different to anyone else. Like, I was cast away as a piece of shit that was locked in a maximum security unit, locked in a segregation unit. I was at the very bottom of the ladder. Like all hope was basically sort of stripped away from me. But I believed, and I thought I'm never going to give up. And I know my life can be better than what it is at the moment. And I worked every single day. And as I said, those small incremental little steps to where I am today. And that's taken well over 10 years.
I talked with Dr. Stephen Seiler, amazing sports physiologist, and he said there's only 3 levers we can pull as an athlete. We can pull frequency, we can pull the duration lever, and we can pull the intensity lever. And when I started talking about what he meant by frequency, it's exactly what you said there. It's small steps. He said if he's starting to coach an athlete, he's not talking about how long they're running or riding. He's not talking about the intensity. He's just talking about getting out the door. Like, can you just get out the door? And I think that's actually a problem with a lot of people I see, whether their goal is to lose weight or to make a lifestyle change. They actually set the goal too big because they're reading all these self-help books about we need this big, huge goal. It's like, find your runners, buy a heart rate strap. Don't get the takeaway. Do something really, really small, and then do something really, really small again tomorrow, and just keep doing that.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with you. Like when I first started exercising, when I was in that segregation cell, I could just about do 10 push-ups. I was so unfit and unhealthy. And then eventually I got to a position where I was doing 1,000 and 1,000 of burpees and 1,000 squat thrusts. But that took time and discipline, and eventually it built the foundation for the body I ended up developing. And when that got itself onto a rowing machine, I had the fundamental strength in my body from all those years of consistency of doing those exercises. And again, it does take time, and it is hard, and you will have a lot of setbacks. Like I failed far more in my life. And obviously when I failed at the beginning, they were really catastrophic failures, which led me to being locked in prison, which was my own fault. But again, you can always turn it around and do something positive with your life. It doesn't matter how far down the wrong road you've gone. You can always turn it around, and you can always achieve something positive with your existence on earth, because we're only on earth for such a short period of time. And that was something, again, from when my dad died to when my friend died, that realization with mortality and the fact that we have to maximize our time here and just be content and at peace and be kind and giving to other people and be of service.
What's next, John?
So what's next? I launched a big project last year called the Alpine Run Project, which is taking young inner city kids out to nature and in the mountains. That's really important to me because sport took me to the mountains. And I've got a goal by 2027. I want to take 100,000 young people from across the UK and other cities in Europe out to like nature and take part in trail running. And yeah, like I just want to keep growing as a person. I want to keep meeting new people. I want to keep developing myself. And we're currently in Girona now. And I just want to meet new people and just have new experiences and just make the most of, again, my short time on earth, really.
Unreal. John, this story, it's it's inspirational, it's transformational, it's, you know, you run out of words to describe it. It's brilliant. You know, amazing getting to know you, and, you know, hopefully we'll get to catch up and we'll go for a bike ride on up to Wales soon.
I'd love that, mate. And thank you for having me on.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please click up here. There's another video I know that you're absolutely going to love. And we're just getting started, so subscriptions really matter. Click over here and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our amazing upcoming guests.